Welcome to East Tennessee Pinball. Today I'm working on a auxiliary soundboard out of a Gottlieb cue ball wizard. Anyway, this is kind of my second run at this. The first run I'll tell you about. So this is the auxiliary soundboard, and right beneath it would be the larger main soundboard. This is a client's house, and I went up there the first time, and the game didn't have any sound, so I was going through, and first thing I was checking, making sure it had all the voltages. This board needs 5 volts, 12 volts, and minus 12 volts. It didn't have the positive 12 volts on it, and so I unplugged the connector. I noticed, the 12 and minus 12 coming on this, I believe it's this connector here. Anyway, I didn't have it coming in here, and there's an auxiliary soundboard that's just over to the right of there. So I unplugged these boards and the main soundboard that also uses the 12 volts and measured the 12 volts coming from the auxiliary power supply. And it wasn't that the auxiliary power supply wasn't making the 12 volts. So I figured, okay, well, and so surely that needed to be fixed, and it did. That didn't fix the problem though. So I put the new auxiliary power supply in here, over to the right, plug it in here. As soon as I plug it into this board here, that 12 volt gets pulled down to about 2 volts. So I turned it off pretty quickly. Actually, I had to plug, because this board here takes the 12 volts, and the main soundboard also takes 12 volts. So I had to hook one of them at a time to figure out which one was pulling it down. It was this one, the auxiliary soundboard. So I pulled this off, took it to the shop. I knew something was wrong with this if it's pulling the 12 volts down to 2 volts. Started looking around in the schematics, and well, first off, actually, I saw these two big transistor looking things, and this is a 5 volt regulator, and this is a 9 volt regulator. And I suspected one of these might be bad, and indeed this one measured as a short, and it's a 7809, so it takes the 12 volts and makes 9 volts out of it, and that one was measuring as a short across 2 of the leads. So here's the schematic. The 12 volts comes in here, and they show on a off an arrow. And then, let's see if I can find it. Okay, so here's that 9 volt regulator, that 7809. It comes in on that 12 volt, and they don't show it leaving as 9, but that's leaving as the 9. There's the G for the ground. But across two of these, that G and the O there, it was showing a short there. So I assumed that this 7809 was bad. In fact, I ordered a bunch of them from Mouser, assuming that was the bad part. So I desoldered it, just like that. It was already desoldered. I just yanked it off again. And if I measured across the first 2 pins there, it still showed a short. So clearly this wasn't the entire problem. In fact, I've got there my new one. I measure the put it on diode settings and measure between the first and second, first and third leads, and I get about 0.5 on all those measurements. So these two test exactly the same in diode tests. Not to say that this thing is working, but it means it's probably working. In any case, that's not the cause of the short. So you go back to the schematics here. So I'm measuring a short between the ground and the 0 side there. If you look at the schematics, the easiest solution to cause that would be if that C37 there, that 4.7 microfarad capacitor, if that was shorted. So with that voltage regulator out of there, there's C37 right there. If I measure it across the resistance across that capacitor, right now, it's the resistance is like 0.2, 0.3 ohms, which is about the accuracy of my meter. I mean, I've got about a 0.2 error. So essentially, that's an open short across there. That doesn't mean that that's where the short is. It could also be a short in this chip somewhere in that chip, that line 8, the line there. If that line 8 is on ground, that would also put a ground to the O, and that would also do it. So if this chip was shorted out somehow or another, that could also be the problem. But the simple thing would be is if just that capacitor. So I desoldered the capacitor. Let's see if I can yank it out of there. And if I measure the resistance of that capacitor just out here by itself, again, it is still shorted. It's got about 0.2 ohms resistance. So definitely that capacitor is shorted, which is the ideal situation because, you know, that's a nothing part. And I can fix that real easy. Is that going to fix the entire board? I don't know. And I don't have this game, or I don't have a Type 3 or System 3 Gottlieb game here in the shop. But I can tell if I'm going to fix a short. So I believe there's a good chance that this is going to fix it, and this will be a pretty cheap fix. Really, just that capacitor. I'll probably go ahead and swap out uh, voltage regulator also. But either way, it's 50 cents or $1 part. So hopefully, when I throw this back in the game, we won't drag down the 12 volts, and we'll actually have sound. I'm hoping so. We'll let you know. Adios. Please subscribe. Bye. Just to follow up, let you know that I put that cue ball wizard soundboard in there and played super good sound and everything was good. I didn't want to film it. I was in somebody's house, but anyway, it's Friday evening. Django's had a hard day of work and he's kind of chilling out, and I am too. So have a good weekend. Adios.